Health is to be a planning tool and a visual assistant as you are working towards planning and goal setting. And at this point, just trying to deal with the scenarios that are changing on us on an hourly basis. So that is fiscal health, just in the briefest of overviews. And now I'm gonna put myself on mute and let Chris come on and make his introductions, and then I'll be back.
Thanks a lot, Liz. And thanks so much, everybody, for joining us for this first cohort of launching Fiscal Health. I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of go back in time and let you know that when we created Fiscal Health, it was actually a tool that was for the Great Recession. When I was in local government, it actually preceded the creation of priority-based budgeting. And the reason we created it was our elected officials were trying to gauge a lot of uncertainty, just like we're facing right now. The market was going down, which was impacting our investments. Interest rates were changing and fluctuating wildly. The economy was changing rapidly, and our board was trying to figure out, with all this uncertainty, there was an urgency to act fast and decisively make decisions, and yet at the same time, nobody wanted an overreaction, a dramatic cut to the budget without at least speculating on what are the various scenarios that we can envision coming up for our near future. And so we created Fiscal Health as a way to model multiple possible future scenarios and allow an organization to react to them. If you've ever read a book called The Art of the Long View by Peter Schwartz, he describes this approach to looking towards the future of scenario planning, saying nobody has a crystal ball. Not a single one of us knows how this is going to unfold. And therefore, instead of putting the pressure on ourselves to forecast precisely or guess correctly, the approach of scenario planning is to say, let's try to bound our uncertainty and say, since we don't know, let's look at what a worst case scenario is that we might envision and talk about what decisions we might make under that worst case scenario that we can envision. And then let's plot out other scenarios that seem possibly more plausible or less, and we'd have different decisions to make along the way. And that's exactly what this tool is all about. The City of Fort Collins, who will be in next week's cohort, we're going to run these cohorts every week for the foreseeable future, as long as there are current ResourceX organizations who are hoping to be able to deploy this tool. In talking with Fort Collins, they too are purely in speculation mode right now. They are looking at things like if their restaurant and beverage industry, if their businesses have to remain closed, clearly there's going to be some level of impact on their sales tax revenues, as just one example. And their city manager is saying, okay, if there's one scenario he can envision where we don't have a bounce back in, say, the next 2 quarters, and for that scenario, the hit on their ongoing predictable revenue streams is such that he would have to make a certain set of decisions. However, if there's some sort of wonderful turnaround that happens sooner than we could expect, maybe there's a vaccine, maybe people get, we are able to flatten the curve. Under that trajectory, there's a different set of decisions that the City of Fort Collins will make, and they want to be able to say there's a timeline, and as we get closer and closer to a certain decision point, they have different decisions that they would plot out. And that's what we want Fiscal Health to be for you, is your ability to try to take a look at what different possible futures might look like in your forecast on the revenue and expense side, to give you the most clarity as possible to plan around in a time of obvious uncertainty overall. So it was our best first thought to deploy this tool to you all and free to get it out there as soon as possible, because we think it could really be a powerful tool in your toolbox as you're considering all possible strategies for right now. So thank you again, and I'll turn it back to Liz.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, just for basic overview of how we're going to spend probably the next 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to do a basic overview of the fiscal health tool, and then I will jump into the data requirements for us to get started. For example, we have Danielle from the city of Lawrence on this call. She sent me the data formatted to our template last night, and we have it more or less ready for her to go today. I'm not making a promise that it'll be that fast of a turnaround for everybody, but we really do want you all to be able to take advantage of this as soon as possible. So as soon as you can get us the data, we'll get moving. Okay, so what are the 5 principles of fiscal health? First is to differentiate between those ongoing expenses and revenues and those one-time expenses and revenues. What can you turn off and on versus what is going to be ongoing throughout your budget cycle. The second is the approach. So in converting over to the Google Docs, I lost some of my artwork and animation, which I think is actually good for you all. But the second is approach. And like Chris said, typically it has been a long-term approach. I scratched out long-term and said, for right now, it's going to be immediate and short-term. We still want to keep long-term, as a point of focus, but really starting to think about what can we do immediately to impact the ever-changing world that we're living in right now. The third is to establish a financial policy framework. So whether that's a reserve policy, debt policy, cost recovery policy, to analyze variances between forecasted budget and actuals. Just our tools will be able to assist you with some of that, but also just to be able to look at it in different scenarios and apply different parameters to that. And then to demonstrate the true cost of doing business at a program level. So moving into the tools and taking those principles with us, we can help prepare financial forecasts. You will have simple plots that you can manipulate with initiatives and scenarios, but also just with turning on and off certain aspects of the data that you plug in so that you can show the immediate short-term and long-term ramifications of decisions or current climate. Being transparent about the true cost of doing business. So separating out one-time and ongoing revenues and expenses. Spending within our means. So again, achieving that revenues exceeding expenses with the ongoing alignment, looking at your reserve policy and making sure that they're being used in the right way, and to promote diversification, and then to establish and maintain reserves. So looking at the long-range plan with this short-term crisis in mind, and looking at that fund balance levels. So if we take each piece of that and look at how we can apply it in the tools, this is what your homepage within the fiscal health tool will look like. These 4 plots will populate every time that you log into your tools. You'll see on the right, we'll have a legend of what budgets are uploaded, and then you can look at your total revenues and expenses by ongoing and one-time. You can look at your fund balance, and you are able to forecast out up to 10 years with a really easy slider so that you can move if you want fewer years or up to 10. Again, you can look at your revenue expenses as a whole or as a total, or you can look at simply the ongoing versus the one-time. So separate views for each of those. And then looking at your fund balance to make sure that the decisions that you are testing out in this tool, the scenarios and initiatives that you are putting in place in this tool, seeing how that is going to affect the reserve policy or total fund balance. So you can see here somebody in this test applied their reserve policy, and you can see based on scenarios that they created where that is going to become problematic. This is our kind of basic fiscal health marketing document. I will have a folder that I'm going to share with all of you at the end of this that will include some of this material, but this is just so that you have this in a quick and easy reference to review or go back to if you're curious, or to share with others. I'm going to hold for questions until the end, simply because I want to take any questions that are in the slides. And so I'm going to jump into the fiscal health preparation, which is where you're going to learn the data requirements for us to get this up and running for you. So this is an example of a template that we had used in the past, and I'm putting this here because it has good examples, but the template that you all are going to be populating for me looks slightly different from this, but it's all of the same information. We're going to need a budget year, budget name, and duration type. So that, and then all of the organizational information is going to be in a hierarchy from fund to category to object to sub-object. So this is just to help you visualize how it's going to look. This is the actual template that you all are going to be populating for me. So the first two columns for this initial upload, you can ignore. I will utilize the first column to add your data, and then in future iterations, you can use commands of add, update, or delete. And the account ID is going to be generated from our system. So you all do not need to worry about columns A and B. In column C, the account code is an optional field for you. You can use this to tie back data to any chart of accounts or any software system that you might be pulling this data from. You can utilize that column if you want to. You certainly do not have to. For the organizational information, we have 3 different account types. You will use starting balance once for that first year of data, and you will enter your starting balance in the one-time column for that first year of data. So for this one, it would be starting balance is entered as the account type and the category, and then you would enter a starting balance in the actual 2017 one-time column. We are limiting in this first effort of the fiscal health initiative to 1 fund. So you will just enter your fund name in column E. And then the category is the highest level for organizing all of the information that we're going to be putting in this template. I have a list of recommended categories that I pulled from several existing fiscal health databases in our system. We are limiting you to 20 categories. The reason that we're doing that is because we want you to really remember that this is a high-level tool, and we don't want you going too far into the weeds with that first level of categorization. I'm having a hard time with big words today. So make sure that as you think about how you want to categorize all of your accounting objects, that we're really shooting for 20 unique categories, and that is expenses and revenue combined, so 20 total. And again, we'll get to the popular, or you'll get a list of those on the next slide. The object is the typical accounting object name that you pull out of your software. And then the sub-object is the next level down. So if there's any more specific descriptives that you want to use, sub-object is a great place to do that. We do have the option for a sub-object, but I'm encouraging you to try to think of how you can keep this at that higher level. If you need the sub-object, that's okay, but what we want to try to avoid is you utilizing sub-object or sub-object to tie back to a department or a division. We really want you to think more high level than that, and we can talk more about that when we get to the discussion slides. For the actual values that we're going to enter, again, we're going to need a budget year, budget name, and a duration type. We would love to have at least 3 years of historical data. We will accept up to 6. We want to have your current relevant budget data. And then if you have projected values that you want to include, you can. We also can do those projections for you from within the tools. So those are the years that we are looking for. So up to 6 of historical data, we really want 3, and then you can include any projections that you have. Then you can name your budget, whatever you want, actual, budgeted, adopted, projected, and then for each year and name, we will have a column, one for ongoing and one for one time. So every single budget will have 2 columns, ongoing and one time. And again, I'm going to provide you with this template, so you don't need to worry too much except for where you want to edit that. These are the suggested category names. I pulled these from several of our fiscal health clients of varying sizes, and our largest fiscal health client was only using 24 categories. So I think 20 is going to be sufficient for everyone. If you have significant problems with that, feel free to reach out to me. It's not a hard and fast rule, but I really would love it if we could limit to that 20, because I think it's going to get you in a more fiscal health frame of mind for how our tools work. So once you have provided me with the initial data set, I will upload that for you, and then you can, once I've done that for you, then I will show you how you can update your data. But I think it's just easier to have one person getting that initial data in so that we don't accidentally upload on top of each other. But once I have that data uploaded, I will turn on your fiscal health tool. You will log into your dashboard as you would to access any other part of PBB. And this button, the blue scales, will be your fiscal health tool. For connecting with us over the next few weeks while we get you up and running and utilizing this to its most helpful potential for you, I am going to be inviting all of you to our Slack space. So we have a Resource Express support Slack, and the channel that has now been created for this initiative is the hashtag Fiscal Health channel. So if you are already a member of our Express support Slack, I will invite you to the channel. If you are not a member, I will invite you to be one, and then you can join that channel. We also take any other kinds of support questions through that. I am creating a fiscal health ResourceX page on our website. It will be resourcex.net FH 2020. It is not live yet, but I will update on Slack as soon as it is. We will continue to have these types of webinars. I don't think that you will need to attend again, but should you decide that you want to, or you want to send somebody else, all of those dates and registration links will be posted there. We also have a YouTube channel that's called the Resource Expert Academy. You can tell I really like to use the X when I name things. So the Expert Academy is available on YouTube. This recording, for instance, will go there. We had a continuity of operation planning meeting last Thursday with the city of Boise. Many of you attended. That's there if you would like to reference it. Also, just some basic how to do things with ResourceX. It's available all in that YouTube channel. So please go visit that if you are interested in looking for any of that information. Okay, that was kind of the end of my slides. I'm gonna X out of presentation mode and see if we have any questions. It looks like here we are. So I'm going to invite ResourceX team to come off mute if you have an answer. But from Danielle, ongoing versus one-time, how do you approach capital programs that receive funding annually? For example, their street maintenance programs. Danielle, thank you. I know you sent this to me earlier and I shared it with Chris, and I'm gonna let him respond.
Thanks, Liz. And one thing that I think you'll you'll start to get used to in this principle of differentiating ongoing versus one-time is that it's not super black and white. I like the nature of your question that in general, if times were great and you wanted to say, hey, look, there's kind of a regular, predictable level of street maintenance that we don't want to put into question with our elected officials. It's more or less the same amount. We have a street maintenance program and a road condition index, asset management, and so on. That for all of those reasons, it's kind of a non-issue. Again, in great times, I would leave it on the ongoing side of the equation and call it an ongoing expense. And you can totally do that now as well. The only reason that you might want to consider putting it as one time right in this environment is if you did want to draw attention to the fact that you could make a choice to defer some of that ongoing street maintenance, even though it's regular and predictable. I might personally, if I were running it for your team, put it on the one-time side and say it's a yes/no decision. If we did have to start to radically make changes to our budget, we might be better served to consider postponing this one-time street maintenance, even though it's been routine in the past. That would be my rationale for putting it on the one-time side, if that helps.
And while we have those slides for you to enter questions, please feel free to come off mute and ask questions, and we can have open discussion here as well. I want to do what is most beneficial for those of you who were able to join today. So if there are other questions about how to get started or how to format data or anything, please let us know. I got a question from Santina about scenario planning. That is tomorrow's webinar. I will briefly talk about it. Not necessarily my area of expertise, but within the fiscal health tools, you are able to create both scenarios and initiatives that you can then demonstrate the effect of those on that plot page. And I actually had a bunch of this stuff open over here. I wanted to let you all see what your options would be here. And so when you log into the tools, you'll see plots, scenarios, initiatives, projections, and fund overview. So you will be able to create initiatives here, you'll be able to create scenarios here, and then you'll be able to see the results here. So again, that is tomorrow. I think many of you have registered for that session, but I think first and foremost, we need to get the data in so that we can help you put that into practice in those webinars that are upcoming.
That's great. Yeah, Lawrence, Kansas, thank you. You guys sent your data over right away, and our hope was, if possible, we'd be able to get everybody's data loaded as a result of this course with Liz. And then during the forecasting and scenario planning webinar, which is tomorrow, and I think, Liz, we have two options for it this week, tomorrow being the first one. That's where we'll start talking about, okay, so now that we have your current data loaded, let's talk about how do you forecast, how do you enter that into the tools. Forecasting is one thing, and then various scenarios will help say, our current forecast shows sales tax revenues growing at a nice 3 to 5%, but then we have a scenario where it plummets to zero growth or negative growth for sure, and that's where we'll get into how to plot those different types of scenarios out, and then start to add possible decisions, what if, those are what we call initiatives, to say, what if for this particular scenario where sales tax plummets, we get some federal funding. Great. One-time revenue will give you some boost into your fund balance. What if it doesn't come until next year? We can move that out. That will be the idea for tomorrow's webinar.
I did just pull up the template that you will be receiving from me momentarily. In fact, I may be able to share it. This is all kind of new. So I am going to share this with you, and I will put this the chat box as well, so that you can, I'm going to try to share it with everybody. Okay, anyone can edit. And it is now in the chat box, so you all have the template as well. So please feel free to contact me. You can direct message me on Slack. You can, of course, email me. But Slack communication sometimes tends to be quicker, and maybe people feel less formal and don't feel like they have to write a whole email. You can just more text each other via Slack. So if that works for you, you can direct message me there. You can go to the Fiscal Health channel. This is what it will look like. So you'll see the Fiscal Health channel has been created. And now I will start to invite all of you to both Slack and this channel.
Danielle, thanks for your question. They just followed up with any general guidance as it relates to what we'd recommend categorizing as one time. Sure. I'll start with some examples, and let's go on the revenue side first. If I were in your shoes right now, a revenue line item like interest income to me feels like very, very speculative. So there's a principle there. The one-time side of the equation might be things that, man, you're really not counting on to come through for you. It's speculative. If it does come in, wonderful. But it's kind of feeling like one-time nature. A grant revenue. Sometimes grants can be very one-time in nature, where there's an annual process to make sure that you're trying to get approved. So it can be to your benefit to put things over on the one-time side that are not a sure thing. I know technically nothing's a sure thing, that's for sure, but the one-time side of the equation are things that truly might be there, it might not on a one-time basis. On the expense side, capital projects for sure. These are things that you can say no to, or you can defer, or they happen on a one-time nature. What other things might be one-time? I mean, capital replacement, fleet replacement, those sorts of things can certainly fall on the one-time side of the house. In general, you want to see on the ongoing side things that are, while they might fluctuate, they come in every year. Another one-time example that comes to mind is like, you might have expenses related to elections that are generally ongoing, and yet every 4 years is a national election, and maybe some of those costs, if you have those distinct, to the extent that they were larger, could be more on the one-time side of the house overall. Hopefully those examples are helpful, but maybe they spark more questions.
I'll add one more thing. This is Summer. I'm a ResourceX developer. We can, if you do have a question about one-time or ongoing, we can always change it later. Just wanted to add that. It's not stuck in there forever.
Great call. fund balance will end up as a one-time source. It's not, fund balance isn't necessarily a recurring revenue. It's a chunk of resources that once you use them, yes, they could get replenished, but they're there for one-time use. It's not like taxes or fees or anything like that. So you'll see that fund balance can be used as a one-time source to plug a gap on the ongoing side of the equation. But that might be another helpful clue of the differentiation between one-time and ongoing. Liz, anything that you wanted in the template, is it necessary to have, I think Lawrence provided a few years of history, and that's definitely an option. It can help as you start to think about a forecast, but so long as we at least have one baseline current set of data in order to use for future forecasting, I think that's helpful. But did you have some general recommendations
Yes.
for how much history you might be looking for?
We would love to have 3 years. We can accept up to 6, but it would be, in order for those projections to be more impactful and meaningful, we would love to have 3 years.
If an organization already has some basic forecasts put in place, like as of a month ago, here's what we were projecting for this particular line item: property tax revenues, or sales tax, or interest income, or what have you. Can they? I'm not sure that it shows in the tools. In the initial template, I mean, can they send that over?
Say that one more time, Chris. You're talking about if they had projections.
Yeah, for out years.
Oh, sure.
For any
yes.
particular line item.
Yes.
Okay,
so
great,
if
great.
you have that and you want to utilize it, great. We will just make note of that so that the legend reads that is from you and not calculated in our tools. Yeah, we would just need it in the same format and include it in this template if you choose to provide that. I know everyone is dealing with a million things right now, so if your brain is on overload and you would like to have some individual communications, just let me know. I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, I will make sure that you all have access to the template and these slides, and I will be in continued communication with you about getting your data.
Thanks, Liz. And thanks, everybody. Look forward to getting your data and the next webinar for forecasting and scenario planning.
Yes, join us tomorrow or Friday for the next chapter.